Look at this map. 3 continents, separated by one vast ocean. Today, those lines look like simple geography. But centuries ago, this ocean became the center of a system that connected Africa, Europe, and the Americas in ways that would change all 3 forever. And what moved across it was not only goods, it was people. Long before the Atlantic slave trade expanded, Africa was already a world of its own. Across the continent, societies had their own kingdoms, governments, markets, trade routes, political alliances, and systems of culture and commerce. Kingdoms such as Congo, Benin, Asante, and Oyo were part of a much larger and diverse African world, connected through trade, diplomacy, conflict, and regional networks. Africa was not an empty continent waiting to be discovered. It was already organized, connected, and constantly changing. Then, across the Atlantic, European colonies in the Americas began expanding. Plantations demanded enormous amounts of labor to produce sugar, tobacco, cotton, coffee, and other valuable commodities. As these plantations grew, so did the demand for workers. That demand helped transform the Atlantic into a massive commercial system. European merchants established trading relationships along parts of the African coast, working with different African rulers, merchants, and intermediaries. Some African states resisted the trade. Others became involved in supplying captives, many taken through warfare, raiding, political conflict, or existing systems of bondage. The relationships were complex, and they varied from one region to another. But the Atlantic trade connected these existing systems to a much larger international market driven by European commercial interests and the growing plantation economies of the Americas. And this was not one simple route. It was a vast network of ports, merchants, ships, alliances, and markets stretching across the Atlantic world. To understand this complicated system, historians often use a simple shape: a triangle, Europe, Africa, the Americas. European manufactured goods moved toward Africa. Enslaved Africans were forcibly transported across the Atlantic, and commodities produced through enslaved labor were shipped back toward European markets. On a map, the system can look almost simple, but behind those arrows were human lives: a mother, a father, a farmer, a craftsperson, a child. People with names, families, languages, beliefs, and communities of their own. Historians estimate that more than 12 million Africans were forced onto ships during the transatlantic slave trade. The Atlantic crossing became known as the Middle Passage. For those forced aboard, this was not a journey they had chosen. They were taken from their homes, separated from families, and transported across an ocean toward an uncertain future. Many did not survive the journey. Those who did were sold into slavery across Brazil, the Caribbean, and North America. Their forced labor became part of enormous plantation economies, producing sugar, tobacco, coffee, cotton, and other commodities for markets across the Atlantic world. Those commodities then moved through Atlantic ports and into European markets. Merchants made enormous fortunes. Banks and trading companies expanded. Ports grew, and colonial economies became richer. But beneath that wealth was a brutal contradiction. An economic system was generating enormous profits while denying millions of people their freedom. The wealth was real. The economic transformation was real, but so was the human cost. The triangle on the map may look simple. The human reality was anything but. Behind every ship was a story. Behind every cargo was a person. And behind every number was an individual life that had been disrupted, separated, or lost. Over time, resistance to the transatlantic slave trade grew. Abolitionists, formerly enslaved people, religious groups, political movements, and others challenged the system from different directions. The trade was eventually abolished by European powers, and slavery itself was gradually dismantled across the Americas. But ending the trade did not erase its consequences. The Atlantic world had already been transformed. Millions of people had been forcibly displaced. Populations had changed. Economies had been reshaped. Cultures had crossed oceans. And systems of racial inequality had become deeply embedded in societies across Africa, Europe, the Americas, and beyond. The consequences did not disappear when the ships stopped sailing. They continued through generations. And that is why this history still matters. Because when we look at the map today, we are not simply looking at 3 continents connected by an ocean. We are looking at a record of movement, power, wealth, loss, resistance, and human lives. So look at the map one more time. The lines are still there. The ocean is still there. But now, those lines